Hello and welcome to another edition of Josh Wants to Talk About Movies. I'm perplexed that we made it through 2020. Congratulations, Chorus. You made it through one of the worst years in American history.
Did we really survive, though?
And to celebrate such an occasion, I felt like we should relax and enjoy something that, that we really love. And that, for me, is Star Wars.
I thought we were going to talk about SpongeBob.
No, we're talking about fucking Star...
Okay, fine. Let's talk about The New Hope.
No, we're talking about the actual start to the series, Star Wars: A Phantom Menace.
Well, this is what I signed up for, folks. Let's get ready to go.
So, many of you probably don't know that me and Chorus actually grew up in the prequel era of Star Wars. And those were the first Star Wars movies that we actually ever watched, so...
Speak for yourself. I was treated to the original trilogy.
Well, I remember the prequels first, and for the most part when I watched them, I never really got understood the criticism and hate because I was a kid, and Jar Jar Binks was funny, and he stepped in poop, and all that jazz. But
we didn't know what a Jamaican accent was.
Yeah, exactly. Everything was fun. And as I grew older, I saw where the hate was coming from with the series, and I understood a lot of the criticisms around it, and that definitely shaped the way I was looking at the series. But looking at it now, at this new lens with this new trilogy that came out, and me just being a person that is way different than when I was younger, did I enjoy the series? Did you enjoy the movie? In one word, describe your experience with Phantom Menace in 3, 2, 1.
Okay.
Fine. Yeah, it's fine.
It's got its highs. It definitely drags in certain places, but overall, I still like to rewatch it. I just do tend to skip through certain scenes.
There are certain areas that definitely need improvement, but honestly, shockingly to say, The Phantom Menace is not that bad. So, Star Wars: A Phantom Menace follows two Jedi Knights as they... No.
Do we really need to describe the plot here? Like, for real, do we need to describe?
That's how I usually do it. I talk about the movie.
Fans, do you know what Star Wars is? Have you heard of the Force? Do you know of all the events that happened in the original trilogy? I'm assuming you haven't watched it, but I can guarantee you know basically everything that happened.
I just like to go with tradition about talking about the plot line, and then we dive into it. But fine, we can break tradition here. We all know what Star Wars Phantom Menace is. This isn't the first Phantom Menace breakdown video that you clicked on YouTube.
Because let's be honest, the actual plot for the Phantom Menace is a complete shit show. What is the inciting incident?
They invaded a planet.
Why?
Because they're greedy.
Do you know why they explain it, though? Because they do show it in the crawl.
To the extent of what I remember, there's a thing called the Trade Federation.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, we want to control this planet and raise taxes of some sort.
No, they were invading the planet to protest against higher taxes being put on them.
Wait, the Trade Federation was protesting higher taxes?
Yes.
Okay.
And that's how much of, they put in, there's a lot of politics in this movie, and you don't need to know most of it. You just get the gist, bad guys, good guys.
Yeah, so the way I always described the plot of Phantom Menace was kind of if you just boil it down to one sentence, it is liberate a planet. That's all they're doing. And that's all you need to know, really. But unfortunately, we know way too much about why they're doing what they're doing, why things are the way they are. And we'll go into why that's in there, but it definitely hinders a lot of the story details because it's not something we really care about.
No.
In A New Hope, they talked a lot. There are a few scenes where they talked about the Republic and how they terminated the Republic, and now the Empire is free to do as they wish. No one really remembers that. Because
I forget about those scenes every time I watch the movie again. The Republic, the Emperor has removed the Republic. I was like, wait, that was a line in this movie?
Yeah, whenever Grand Moff Tarkin talks about that, no one really remembers that because it's not really an important part of the story, and there's a reason why it's sidelined, because that's not the main story. But unfortunately, it's not balanced well. I understand why it's in there, but it honestly is hindering a lot of the enjoyment out of it.
100%. It also doesn't help that we know, just as a fundamental level, what this movie is really about. It's about bringing in Anakin and Obi-Wan into the story. It's about setting up Padme and the romance that happens there.
Yes.
But just knowing that that's what this is setting up, it just makes you so hyper-focused on those elements that it not only does those elements not deliver, in my opinion, everything else around it, the excuses to have these events happen, don't hold up on their own.
With this prequel trilogy, it definitely felt a lot like George Lucas was trying to put in bullet points to certain events that happened before A New Hope. So we have to like hit certain elements. It happens a lot more in the later films when we talk about them. In The Phantom Menace, there's only a couple, like you mentioned. The romance, bring in Anakin, Obi-Wan has to train him. Those are the three most important things that need to be brought up in this movie. Everything else is kind of inconsequential.
Yeah.
You know, that's not a bad thing as long as you make it, in a sense, entertaining. To an extent it is. And it has like some emotional importance to those bullet points.
Yeah.
Again, has some elements of it, but unfortunately, not very well balanced. Tell me, Chorus, what are some good things about Phantom Menace?
Well, you have Darth motherfucking Maul.
Yes.
I do think got capped way too early. I honestly believe that you could have Count Dooku as like a leader type figure.
Sure.
But you don't need Grievous. I feel like you could have had Maul like through all three prequel movies. It would have been so much cooler if you built up to a final climax, because Maul and Obi-Wan, that rivalry, is the best part of Clone Wars. I feel like it could have been so more built up.
I think initially Lucas kind of made Maul like a Boba Fett type character, where it's like strong, silent, does the thing, he's evil, we gotta stop him. He was kind of just a grunt figure for the most part. The majority of the intrigue that came from Maul was everyone else latching onto his character.
Oh yeah, his design's fire.
His design's great. The first different lightsaber design in the series, so that kind of like threw people away. Like, whoa, you can have a double-bladed lightsaber. A really cool, unique design, and kind of expands like the idea of like lightsabers in general. Speaking of like expanding like the Force and all that, just lightsaber fights in general. Because if you watch the original trilogy, it's fencing. It's pretty much what it is. They flash the lightsabers around and slash each other, which is not bad by any means. This actually added a lot more flair.
Yeah.
And Lucas definitely took the advantage of like special effects and made like Jedis do anything they really wanted. Jump high, run fast, use the Force, and like...
I will say that of the prequel trilogy and the original trilogy, I would say that Phantom Menace might have the best fight choreography.
In terms of the original trilogy, they limited the fights for a reason. Because they wanted to maximize the importance of each fight. Because if you do fights every like 5 minutes...
But also they couldn't do much with the pro-type lightsabers that they had. Those things shattered so easily. They could that's part of the reason why it's just like fencing, like light taps. Because if you swing those things would shatter.
Yeah. So
it's like this is where they got some like carbon fiber material, and like they were like, okay, no, we can have fun with this.
Yeah, and they also were able to go just beyond like regular fencing. They were able to utilize a lot of different fighting styles, which I think George Lucas really enjoyed a lot of like Kurosawa films and a lot of samurai type movies, and that's heavily influenced in the original trilogy too. But he's able to like utilize martial art fighting styles within Star Wars and like the prequel series with their lightsaber fights, which made it a lot more entertaining to watch.
You can't talk about the fights here without bringing up Trey Parker. No, fuck.
No, from South Park?
Not South Park. Cut that out.
No, I'm not.
Who's Darth Maul?
Ray Park.
Ray Park.
Yes.
You can't talk about the fights in the Phantom Menace without bringing up Ray Park.
Ray Park is like one of the biggest stuntmen from the 90s who was, if you don't know who he was like the Jackie Chan for like American films and stuff like that.
Yeah. Because all his like choreography as Darth Maul was all him.
Yeah.
He planned all of that out, and it just shows because he's having so much fun with it.
Yeah.
That it like really I just could never get enough.
Another thing that I really enjoyed out of the prequels that I don't think gets a lot of attention or kind of gets the opposite point of view. I think the effects in this prequel movie are kind of the best out of the prequel trilogy.
Yeah, I can see that because I feel like Phantom Menace, you still got that nice mix of practical versus CGI.
That's the thing.
And they don't... Clone Wars on. George Lucas kind of lost his mind and like, I can do anything.
Everything blue screen.
I can do anything?
Yes. The issue with like the later films in the series is that, as much as I applaud George Lucas for like expanding the ability to like do different things with visual effects and breaking boundaries with that, there are some limitations with that. But with this film, there's still a lot of heavy interest on practicality. Real sets. Utilize a lot of physical props. Like the battle droids, like they are CG in the film, but they actually use practical stand-ins for them to swipe at and all of that. The Boonta Eve pod racing scene, that whole stadium is a miniature. that they shot with a camera and like put digital effects in later on.
The Trade Federation aliens, that's all practical effect makeup.
Their masks and their effects.
I feel like after this movie, almost all like the new aliens we meet are CGI.
CG, yeah. Most of them are CG. Some of the aliens in the background are practical too. And for the most part, again, you got to remember this is 1999, and this is the first time they're using mocap and like on Jar Jar, and like he's one of the first ever mocapped characters. And you know, obviously some of the effects with Jar Jar are dated, but it still stands pretty good in terms of like understanding the time period that it's at.
And I feel like most of the effects still hold up to today.
Yeah,
there's definitely some weird like bad CGI. Like the things that always stood out to me were. Like, even as a kid, I just knew these things looked wrong. It was Jabba the Hutt, who appears, like, for 10 seconds, but he's full CGI, and he looks fake. That, and then there's the announcers for the pod racing, the two-headed guys. It's, there's, like, just those instances where, like, they're experimenting with what they can do with CG.
But it's not, like, a lot of the film.
No, it's these limited stints that they haven't figured out the technology yet, so they don't look as great as I think they should.
Yes.
And that really did take me out of it. Because like it still bothered me as a kid, and I feel like that's noticeable because there's other stuff that came out like just a little bit afterwards where
The Matrix came out that year.
yeah, and like I was like, no, I'm all for this. I can still like I totally buy into this.
Yeah. Speaking of like pod racing in general, pod racing is great. You know, a lot of people complain about pod racing, like, oh, it's too long, you know, it's like...
I loved it. I loved it as a kid.
Not only is it just great visually and gives a great sense of speed and, like, great variation of, like, different styles and effects that you utilize for, like, these different little pod racers, but the other thing is, like, the sound design for the pod racing is phenomenal. Immaculate. It's great. I remember so many of these sound effects because they're just so unique and fun to listen to. And the other really, I don't want to say bold, but the really interesting choice they did was that for most of the pod racing, there's no music. It's just natural sound and, like, the pod racers just going in and out. Lucas heavily invested like a lot of this focus on like sound effects really carrying the story for this section. I think it really helped later on. I felt invested and I thought it was just really fun to watch. And again, it was something new.
Yeah.
Like a lot of Star Wars, especially now with this trilogy, is a lot of repeating. Yeah. And this movie does a lot of repeating too.
Yeah.
But like it was something new and expanded the universe, which I really appreciated. Speaking of which, there's another thing this film did, which was expand the Star Wars universe. Yeah. One thing that, like, I will give this prequel trilogy a lot of, I'll applaud a lot, is the fact that it expanded the Star Wars universe in a way that the original trilogy couldn't. Which was, like, you know, bringing in these whole new worlds, different designed aliens, and, like, just creating this different atmosphere.
It felt like it made it more than just the human show plus Chewbacca.
Yeah, they were actually able to make it a vast and diverse universe, which I really applaud and appreciate. And I'm very happy this film was able to like expand that, because like my perspective of the Star Wars universe comes from this prequel trilogy. That's how I kind of view it.
My only complaint that I can say, like in the world building, I heard this recently, I don't remember where, but Star Wars in itself, it tells stories and has characters that aren't big enough for the world itself.
Right.
Because the story, like, oh, you're getting these little glimpses of this massive expanded universe. And it's like, wow, there's kind of too much here for me to really, like, get all of that, to really understand a lot of it. So then it just becomes a little bit too much that you then have to then go through expanded material to find out more, to learn. Because that's what I did. Like, I was like, who's that character? Who's that character? I would, like, go through, like, the wikis trying to figure out who everyone was.
Same.
But then it just becomes a problem of, like, you want to know so much that you kind of just lose track of the story a little bit.
It definitely makes sense that you can't, like, be told everything because that detracts from the story. But yeah, there's just, like, a lot that is kind of, like, you're kind of just expected to, like, just go with it. Like, oh, that aliens exist and this culture exists, so we're not going to explain that, just go with that. That's a very George Lucas thing to do. Like, even in the original trilogy, it's like, oh, here's Chewbacca. He doesn't speak English, but they all know what he's saying. Like, it's that kind of stuff where it's like, all right, we're just expected to know what this is all about. One thing I really enjoyed, and a lot of people kind of give this a little flack too, is Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon Jinn. A lot of people say, like, it doesn't really have a character. You know, Liam Neeson, like, a lot of the actors kind of are just there.
No, I don't blame any of the actors.
I don't either.
For their performance in there, because George Lucas
is not really a...
He's not a great director for acting. Because there was this great scene I once found, like, from an old interview. Mark Hamill telling a story from on set where Harrison Ford, who threatened to tie up George Lucas and force him to read his dialogue. Because, like, let's see you read this naturally. George Lucas feels like purple prose where, like, you'll have very complicated way of saying very simple things.
Yes.
And you have the actors who are so busy trying to, like, remember all this dialogue, they kind of forget to perform.
Yes.
Which I feel is a problem that plagues all of George's movies.
Yes.
And I don't think it plagues any movie as much as Phantom Menace.
Because there's so much, like, detail involving, like, the Trade Federation and all this, where it's like, okay...
You have the Space Senate.
Yeah,
We have these villains trying to explain why they're doing this. You have Liam Neeson trying to explain, oh yeah, this is what Jedi are.
Yeah.
You have this virgin birth that's just sitting around here. You have this very Jewish stereotype with Watto.
Listen, I like Watto. I understand. Yes.
You can see where that came from, but you have a lot of people trying to explain everything about themselves and just how they talk.
Yes.
But they all talk the same.
But to get to my point about Liam Neeson, I really enjoyed his character because the main gist I got from Qui-Gon was that he's kind of like this really cool teacher that's fine with you smoking weed. That's kind of like he's just like not a major traditionalist and is open to new things and like is able to diversify himself through the Force. And you kind of see that how he interacts with Anakin. Like, he's like, they say you're too old, but I don't care. I want to teach you. Or like, you have a lot of promise and I want to help you. He's kind of like the father figure that Anakin really needed.
It's the father figure you need so you can kill him off.
Which is more tragic when they actually kill him off. Is there anything that you enjoyed in Phantom Menace?
So I will forever love the pod racing.
I
even enjoyed the Gungan battle.
Yeah, that's actually really cool too.
I do found like they have these weird orbs. Which I don't think it makes any sense from technology standpoint, but I just love the idea that they basically have these giant electrical paintballs they have to chuck at these giant droid armies.
It's not guns, it's like something interesting and new.
Yeah. I definitely like because this is what I'll say, I love the designs for like the Gungans. Like I love their underwater city. I like their like tech. I think that's all super cool.
Yes.
I remember as a kid though, I did not fucking understand. Like one, I saw how they had like rebreathers. They'd like swim to the bottom of the lake.
Yeah.
Then I never fucking knew, like, okay, how do they go from the bottom of the lake to, like, the other side of the planet? Because, like, they have this little
They
thing.
have to go through the planet core.
But then I just never, like...
It was a lot shorter to get
even
through.
Back then, I was like, but the planet's rock.
But it's Naboo. It's an alien planet. It's different. It has a water core.
He's like, you have a sudden, like, just giant sea monster come out. And I was like... Even back then as a kid, I was like... The fuck's going on? I forget it every single time. And every time it pops up, I'm like...
I had fun with the sequence.
What?
I think it's fun.
Why is there sea monsters?
Well, it's a lake. It's an alien planet.
I could cut that shit. If I was editing this, I would cut that out in a heartbeat.
It's definitely not needed, but I thought it was fun.
Because I should be
Maybe
talking about
I'm blind.
I should be talking about things I like.
Yes.
Because I liked Maul. I liked Liam Neeson. I actually kind of liked the child actor they had for Anakin, to be honest.
I'll get to him in a sec, but...
I think we'll talk about it more, but I think he's doing a fine job, all things considered.
Here's the thing. I don't get it. I don't get why all of a sudden, like, everyone just hates Jake Lloyd.
No, I don't get it.
Because, like, he is definitely not the worst child actor I've ever seen. Not by a fucking long shot.
We watched The Last Airbender. We've seen bad teen actors.
Yes. So, like... And all of a sudden, it's just okay to gang up on this 10-year-old kid and say that he's really bad.
Oh no, that guy has said that Star Wars ruined his life.
It's not Star Wars. It's Star Wars fans that ruined his life. Because I remember you saying like, yeah, on set it was really fun. I got to be around George and we got to have fun like working with Star Wars stuff. But like everything else beyond that, fucking destroyed him. And I feel really bad because he out of the people that deserve hate. He is like he's the person that least deserved anything.
Yeah.
Like he deserved no hate. I don't understand it. Like, sure, like maybe his acting wasn't fantastic. Like, okay, great. Like I just don't get it. He was fine.
No one's acting was fantastic in that movie.
Well, it's also like this might generate a lot of strife with people, but like I think like he brought a lot of personality to the movie. 'Cause
Are you an angel?
Yeah, okay. Here's what I'm getting at. So, like, imagine, like, a good 30 minutes into the movie, you just hear, like, Princess, they're gonna kill you if you stay. I need to sign this declaration. It's all formal. It's all formal speak. Then you introduce this kid who's like, come on, I want to show you something. He kind of adds, like, a little pep and personality to what he's doing. Like,
but even then, I do think that I feel like he acts too young.
He does. He's, like, 10, but he acts like he's 5.
Yeah, he acts like he's 5, and that's always, like, maybe kind of weird about, like, because they do Padme and Anakin romance.
Yes.
And it feels like you have like a 14, 15-year-old girl talking to this 5-year-old. If you told me he was 10, I would have been like, nah, he's like 6.
I think that's not just a George Lucas thing. I think people just don't really know how to write kids because they always just assume like anything below 13 is like, oh, I'm innocent and sweet.
Yeah, that's just hard to write.
Yeah.
But even here, it just feels especially bad.
But he's still... The thing is, like, he at least... is like fun. Like he like has fun with what he's doing. He at least adds a little bit of personality in certain areas, like bop it on the nose, and like he has a range of emotions that at least makes it fun to watch, where everyone else is kind of just like very formal. And it's just an interesting contrast where it's like, oh, you're the most like emotionally investing person in this entire series.
And Jar Jar.
And Jar Jar, but like...
The only 2 characters that emote.
It just bothers me a lot, and I just don't get the hate, and I'm sorry. Like, Jake, I doubt you're going to be watching this, but I'm really sorry that this happened to you, and you don't deserve any of it.
Again, I love most all the set designs.
Yeah.
I love the look of most of the aliens, even though I do say, like, some of them look too CG.
Yes.
But I will forever love the droids.
Yeah, they're like the droidicas themselves are like the most unique droid looking design I've ever seen. It's like a ball that has a tripod legs and like
I love like
this.
you have these crazy variations. Like you have these crazy ball ones that like put up force fields and like they shoot lasers. They have like these robot like skeleton ones that like Roger. And I'm like, oh, I love those things. I thought they were so cool.
They're really fun.
Because like, I feel like if you go from stormtroopers, which were always a joke, to then these droids, which have all the like despite being mechanical, they have way more personality than the stormtroopers do.
They're a lot more fun to play around with, and like I guess you can also do a lot more because it's a lot less morbid to destroy droids than people. So they're like, oh, we can just do whatever we want with these things, and no one will care. The one last thing I really just enjoyed about Phantom Menace is the score, John Williams. It definitely is a major highlight of this entire prequel trilogy, and I think the one thing it has a leg up on the sequel trilogy is its music. And it was something new. It wasn't just like, let's play the Force theme for the 13th time.
Yeah. But I actually still really enjoyed, like, the rest of the Gungans.
Yeah.
Like, I like the general dude. I like the big heavy guy.
Boss Nass is his name.
He's like the whole, like... Like, I would still, like, do a little bit of those shakes when I was, like, after watching the movie, like...
The only issue I have with them is sometimes I don't understand what they're saying.
Yeah.
It's like, I had to watch it with subtitles because sometimes it's like, what are you saying?
I understand every third word Jar Jar says. One thing that kind of threw me for a loop was, like, we started doing, like, this is that character from the originals.
Yeah.
Because, like, R2-D2 makes his reappearance at this grand climactic moment in a scene that I do find to be very tense.
Yeah.
The thing that threw me off was C-3PO.
Yeah.
Who just pops in and is like, Anakin's like, oh, I built him.
Which was...
I was like...
Something that I don't think
I
don't think any of us were really like clamoring to know where C-3PO came from. But it was just like, it opens so many questions, like why? But like, I guess the bigger question is, how does this impact the story at all?
So you just need to have him be like kind of like the nanny bot for like Padme or something like that.
Yeah. Like
that's all you really need to know. I found it really funny though, like R2, like, he saves the day one time. They're like, well, I guess you can just follow us around for the rest of the life.
The one thing I really liked about C-3PO, I mean, obviously he was, like, stripped down, but, like, the fact that I think it was practical and they just had CG, like, they had sticks that, like, puppeteer move him around and that was, like, green screened out. But he looks really real.
Oh, he does.
Which is very surprising to me because it was just, like, he's so thin and frail, like, you can't put an actor in that. But it's, like, anytime you see him around, it's, like, it's a robot standing there. Chorus, what did you not like about Phantom Menace?
Coruscant needed to go. Because it is a scene of, like, heavy politics to explain, because George Lucas has said, he basically has built this trilogy on, like, how does
the Empire happen?
How does the Empire happen? How do you end democracy with an applause? Like, the best line of the entire trilogy. I mean, he's basically spent his entire time working towards.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, okay, well, to set that up, we need to set like the before time this person became chancellor. And I'm just watching this, I'm like, as a kid, my eyes just glaze over.
Right.
It just becomes a series of like exposition dumps. It's like, well, okay, well, we're doing this politics stuff. Let's go see Anakin at the council. Like, oh, he's too old. Move on. And more exposition. Midichlorians. It just becomes all this extra information that I did not want.
Sure.
And even to this day, I still don't care for.
The one thing I'll say is that the way you could have improved Coruscant is that you kind of just boil it down to bullet points and then add some more emotion into it.
Because I feel like it already is bullet points. I just feel like there isn't like that strong of a narrative to it.
Because, like, I understand why it's in there. Because it's like you have to have some reason why Palpatine exists, and you have to bring in the council and the Senate.
So then they kind of say fuck it all and like go do everything without the Coruscant anyway.
Yeah. So they had to introduce it in some way, which I understand. The issue is that they drive too heavy into like, well, we have to set up a meeting, and then we're going to have to set up info, and then like we have to talk about it, and then oh, you don't have any proof, and it's like we already been through this.
I just love the way they're tossing like, you have no proof. I'm like,
we had 2 Jedi.
We have it. The planet has been invaded. Go take your motherfucking telescopes that you know you have.
Here's the thing. 2 Jedi witnessed this whole thing happen. They're witnesses to it. That's evidence.
Yeah.
And, like, I understand they were there on secret from the title call. I think it was like they were secretly sent by the senator or whatever. But, like, you could just been like, well, we have these 2 Jedi. They witnessed the invasion. I feel like that we already, like, praised and we rely on the Jedi a lot. I feel like their word is pretty good.
I also didn't like puppet young Yoda.
I think later on
they added CG to him.
Yeah,
but I remember in the original he
didn't look like the Yoda that we know.
Yeah, but even then he looked off.
Yeah,
because the other one you could hide in darkness a little bit to like really kind of hide some of the fault. This one was like just in the sun, like looked with this glazed look in its eye that I kind of just could not.
I think what just threw it off is that his design looks radically different from like Empire, and I think again what you mentioned before is like he's supposed to be younger. Sure, I get that, but it's like he looks like he has limited movement. I think the major thing with Coruscant, and like we mentioned before, is that George Lucas kind of just like he has great ideas of getting to bullet points, but the means of getting there are muddled and not very well thought through. So like when we have Coruscant, it's like, well, I have to put in all these things to make it all make sense. It just kind of like it bloats the story out, and it kind of just it slows down the pacing a lot.
I'm of the opinion that Phantom Menace has great moments, but I feel like the story overall doesn't feel like a whole film.
Yes,
it feels like a series of short films of varying quality. Because you have Tatooine, you have the beginning with Coruscant, and you could honestly, you could start at the beginning of each one of these little parts. And not need to know any of the what previously happened. You could start the movie on Coruscant with just Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon Jinn said like, hey, I found this kid. And you could legit do that with all these scenes. And just becomes kind of this like, okay, I like pod racing. Didn't need to sit through 30 minutes of them like getting ready for pod racing.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
And then like, okay, well, we're just going to go back.
We started exactly where we ended.
Cut out Coruscant. You can cut out You could legit just do Tatooine, back to Naboo.
Yeah.
So it feels like there isn't like enough of the story. There is like stuff that connects it.
Yeah.
But I don't feel like the plot really works.
I feel that for the most part, like a lot of these story beats are meant to like, cause like there's that famous line that George Lucas puts in like the behind the scenes where it's like poetry. It rhymes. This movie is pretty much a different version of A New Hope. Find a kid, find out he's special, goes on this secret mission, mentor dies, blows up a spaceship. Like that, I feel like he was just trying to like meet those regular beats, but unfortunately, like there's all this just other stuff in there that bloated and really hard to like work around, and I don't know. It definitely is an issue.
One thing I always found ridiculous, even as a kid, was the Jedi Council trying to like say, no, we can't train Anakin. He's too young. And I'm sitting here thinking he's like 6 or 7. I was like, Or no, he's too old. They
Oh,
say
yeah,
he's
he's
too
too
old.
old.
I was thinking he's 7 or 8. And I'm like,
How young do you start?
how young do you want them? Do you want them from the cradle? You guys are warrior monks, right? You're like philosophers.
Yeah.
Ever heard of therapy?
Yeah.
Ever thought of, like, helping kids work through their problems?
Isn't
Because basically you're saying, like, okay, you have super talent. You're super talented.
the other thing?
Let's not have you train with us. Send you out into the world. And our best case scenario here is that you just forget about your powers and don't turn out to be like a serial killer.
If I am going to give the Phantom Menace any other positive remarks, is that this series, at least from the way George Lucas tries to do it, shows the fault of like the way the Jedi work and like why the Jedi fell and like why this whole philosophy doesn't exactly work. Because like this whole thing with the Jedi is like hide your emotions, they cloud your judgment, and like clear your mind. Everything else is inconsequential. And there's like a lot of consequences with that if you live your life that way. And clearly showed with Anakin.
Yeah.
And it kind of just shows like the Jedi aren't as like balanced as they think they are.
Yeah, but I also feel like that's a background thing.
Yes.
Where, like, you can read the subtext into it. It's not like a major part of the story.
Right.
Which I kind of wish they did go a little bit more into that.
Speaking of Anakin, an issue I had with this story and his involvement. So let's say that you've never watched a Star Wars movie and this is the first time you're watching Star Wars. And, you don't understand that this has to have some parallels with A New Hope and all of that. And you're just watching this movie and you're being introduced to like this young prodigy child. Like, he has one with the Force. He has like, he's super talented, great pilot. And then later on in the movie, he's not really that important. He does blow up the machine that controls the droids to help the Gungans like do their distraction thing.
That seems to exist solely so that they can do their own version of the Death Star.
That's exactly. So he doesn't really have a lot of impact on the climax of the story, which kind of brings up the idea of like, well, he wasn't really that important in this story to begin with. The only major important thing he did was win the pod race, but that was like the middle of the movie.
Yeah,
so,
and that's something that you could easily cut out.
Yeah, so honestly, like the addition to Anakin seemed unneeded, which is kind of an issue when the whole series is about him.
Yeah.
The other thing is that his relationship, this is an issue I'm going to have with the rest of the prequel trilogy when we talk about this, but his relationship with Obi-Wan is non-existent in this movie. I don't think they exchange a line. I think they shake hands one time, and then they never talk to each other ever. And if you're wanting to show me that like this is a great tragedy of their friendship, it kind of limits my investment if like we don't really see them interact that much.
I don't think Obi-Wan has a connection with any of the characters. I feel like he has a tentative connection with
Qui-Gon.
Like, even like he's the master.
Right.
He's like of anyone in the movie, he should be the closest with him.
Yeah.
But what do? They basically, like, if they're not just standing together, like, giving exposition, they're apart.
Right. And that's the other thing, is that, Ewan McGregor is a great actor, and he plays a great Obi-Wan later in the trilogy.
Anyone could have played Obi-Wan in this film.
Because Obi-Wan doesn't do anything. And I understand, like, in a certain sense why. Because, like, it's Qui-Gon trying to build up a relationship with Anakin, which makes it more tragic when he's dead, and, like, Obi-Wan has to take the mantle. I get it. But, like, you don't have Obi-Wan do really he doesn't really have much of a character.
No.
He kind of just sits in a ship during all Tatooine and being like, well, the ship is operating at this level.
Then you have him on Coruscant just following around Qui-Gon, being like, basically he's saying, like, you can't do this, Qui-Gon. And he's like, watch me.
Watch me. And then
it is until like the end where he's one-on-one with Maul.
And there's emotion there.
But even then, it's still mostly Qui-Gon's fight until like that very final part.
It feels off that all of a sudden it's just like, well, it's Obi-Wan and now it's his kind of story after he like fights Maul. He doesn't really have any presence in the movie. Let's see. Oh. Midichlorians.
I didn't care. It didn't matter to me when I was a kid. It didn't matter to me, like, midichlorians, These things exist. These are the reasons. It doesn't matter too much to me right now. But I just feel like they're just such a...
Why?
It doesn't matter. You just gotta say, like, I can feel this child is strong in the Force.
That's all you need.
But then they're like, oh no, we need to have, like, a whole other reason why Anakin's so special. Like, Qui-Gon will go out of his way.
He has more than Master Yoda. Okay. Star Wars is weird when it comes to, like, going over the Force. We talk and this happened when we were talking about Last Airbender. The magic, you don't need to explain it.
No.
The spirituality, we don't need to know.
Some stuff just exists.
And it's fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're fine with that. And honestly, if you do explain it, it just opens up more questions and leaves things more complicated.
Yeah.
And it leaves it less interesting because there's no mysticism behind it. The Force is, a galactic magic thing. That's all I need to know. But if you're telling me that, like, yeah, certain people have to have a certain blood type to become magical space wizards, that kind of takes away a lot of the importance of just, like, anybody can be a Jedi. Yeah. Because, like, what was the one thing with Luke? He was just, like, a nobody that, like, learned how to use the Force.
It's only later that we find out his dad was Darth Vader.
Exactly.
Now they start adding, like, because legit me for a show that's, like, about, like, okay, we're gonna fight the Nazis, we're gonna beat the Nazis.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, we're gonna care about all this stuff, like, we're gonna care about blood ties. Yeah. You don't matter unless you're from an important family. Yeah. You need to have, like, this certain, like, blood in you that makes you inherently more special than everyone else. I feel like that just goes against everything that, like, you're trying to set up is, like, anyone can be a hero.
Yeah.
But only
special people
can be heroes.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like the biggest issue with it is that it just detracts from the importance of just, like, anybody can have the Force. Because now you're, like, putting in science into it. Now you're just saying, like, oh, somebody has to have a certain thing to be important. And I think that's kind of a detriment. And honestly, if anything to cut out, I think, like, that probably is the biggest one. And what's funny is that that's the only movie that really talks about it.
Yeah.
And then all the other ones just kind of forget about that in general.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you didn't even need it in the first place.
No.
So, like, out of everything in the Phantom Menace, like, that fans fucking hate, this is the one I kind of have to agree with.
To me, it's a movie of short films.
Yes.
Where I love that intro.
Yeah, yeah.
Where it's just Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan escaping. They're fighting the droidekas. They're out. But then what do? They're trapped on the planet. They're dealing with fucking Jar Jar. They're, like, walking around for a long period of time. Yeah. Because, to be completely honest, from the moment they get to, like, the Gungan city, I forget everything that happens until they're leaving the planet again. Because nothing in between that time feels that particularly memorable. Like, anything of real importance.
From what I remember, they go to the city, they get the princess, because she was captured.
They sneak around for a little bit.
They get the princess who was captured. They're like, we need to escape, we need a ship. And they fight their way to a ship, and then they leave. And then there's a blockade.
Yeah, that's when I start remembering things again.
Yeah.
Then it's like, as soon as they get to Naboo, they're like, oh, where are we going to go? Oh, let's go to Naboo. Okay, let's do something. What's going? Okay, there's meeting Anakin. Block. We need to do a pod racing thing. Pod racing happens. They fight Maul for the first time.
Yeah.
Then I glaze over again as soon as they leave the planet and we're back on Coruscant.
Yeah, and then we still going home. And then you're like, all right, we're going back.
But then I actually glaze over again until, like, they meet the Gungans, immediately convince them to fight. And then it's like, okay.
Yeah, all that racial prejudice that apparently the Naboobians had over the Gungans just went out when it was like, oh, you bowed before me? Okay.
Because then they start fighting again.
Yeah.
And I feel like I remember shots of that fight that I do like the fight, like the battle.
Yeah.
I remember shots, but if you're trying to tell me, like, what was, like, the flow of the battle, I will not be able to tell you.
There's 4 different climaxes in this movie, because it's the battle, it's Anakin flying the ship, it's them fighting Maul, and then it's the princess getting the Trade Federation guys and, like, invading, like,
oh my god, they do that, don't they?
That's the most forgettable one, I will admit. That's the one I don't really remember that well. But there's, like, 4 climaxes, and it's really hard to balance that editing-wise. I think in, like, the behind the scenes, George Lucas was, like, realizing when he was watching, like, the first cut of it, like, wow, there's a lot that's going on.
Yeah.
I think the biggest issue that you have is that, like, you spread all these characters out when it's like, we really liked them when they were all together. And I think it would have been much more interesting impact if you had them all together involved in these different things. But
also, we haven't brought her up once. I feel like we should at least mention her. What did you think about Natalie Portman in this movie?
I thought she was fine. Like, she was pretty good. Given what what she was given. It's hard to really wrap my brain around, like, oh, she was a decoy, but she was the actual princess, and then it's like, oh, she wanted to walk around this Tatooine planet because she was interested in it. Because her whole thing was like, in this movie, she's like, I didn't know there was this much suffering in the galaxy or something like that. Could have made that an interesting character arc for her. Made her kind of like stuck up in the beginning, and then she realizes like, oh, there's things beyond me.
Yeah, but that involves adding character to the story.
I totally get, where this
we
is
need to
from.
talk. We need more midichlorian space politics.
But all I'm saying is like, you could have done a lot with her character, but I feel like it was just like,
But she wasn't the focus.
but the only thing I felt like she was there was like, well, she needs to be there because she needs to meet Anakin. Mm-hmm. That was it, like that was it. It's just like that was obligation. Like, oh, she needed to be there for some reason. Again,
that feels like a lot of the movie, though.
Again, what I'm saying is like George has great pinpoint ideas, but the transition to get there is not very well thought out. Like, for example, so Lucas in this story sets up that they need to get to Anakin somehow, and they need to leave with Anakin. Mm-hmm. So how do we do that? Oh, maybe the ship broke down. Like the engine's not working, so we have to land on this planet where Anakin is, and that's how we meet him. And then so it's like, okay, we have Anakin, but he's a slave. How do we get him? Oh, maybe he like wins out through pod racing or something like that.
We also need to have him have this dark moment later on with his mother.
Right.
So he's going to be able to leave, but he has to leave his mom behind.
Right. Okay, so wait, but we have the ship breakdown, but for some reason we can't get the parts immediately, so we need to stay and know more about Anakin so that way we know he gets the Force. But we also need to find some way to convince his slave owner to let him go. Oh, maybe we should do this pod race. And they do like 2 different scenes where they like change up the bet. Like originally Qui-Gon's like, well, I'll bet in this pod race that we get the ship parts, and he's like, okay. And then they do it a second time. He's like, oh, in this new bet I get Anakin. It's like,
but then he tries to get the mom too, but then he's like, okay, no, only the boy.
But they're like juggling so much because George had these ideas like, well, I need to get here and I need to get here, but the means of getting there is just kind of muddled.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I forgot to mention this, but in terms of praise, one thing I really enjoyed about the Phantom Menace was Anakin and his relationship with his mom.
Yeah, that's actually really good.
That felt genuine. Like, that felt like a mother and son relationship. And I was like, oh, it's very tragic that they left. And I also believe that they have a relationship with each other.
One really fun bit of trivia that I always remember is because I don't remember the actor's name.
Yeah.
But, like, she's Swedish.
Oh, really?
And she was like, asked George, like, hey, should I adjust my accent?
Yeah.
He's just like, no, you're from the Swedish planet. Don't worry about it. That does actually always ram a question to me. Is like, okay, you have the Swedish mom.
And an American boy.
I was like, okay, that's a thing that's happening. I just found it weird that Sidious was actually in the film as Sidious. Because he kept popping in to talk like the Trade Federation, then popping out of the movie.
Yeah.
You have him talking with Maul.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of just feel like it just feels like this film is supposed to be like, oh, Palpatine's master plan to gain power.
Right.
But I also feel like it kind of would have been better if they just only have Maul involved.
Yeah, and then we don't know who his master is.
And then you just kind of make a retroactive thing of like, holy shit, this is what was going on. Like, it would make watching The Phantom Menace, like, within the context of the trilogy, so much more investing if you only know him as Palpatine first.
Yeah.
Because then, like, you kind of realize, okay, this is what he's playing at. This is his game. This is his master plan.
Yeah.
Where here, it is so, like, transparent.
Oh,
like,
that's Ian McDermott.
it's like Ian McDermott, like, just doing his thing. You have him in, like, playing both sides.
Yeah.
And it just feels like you get what's going on immediately.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot more to talk about, I feel, with Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, in terms of prequel issues, the next couple of movies are going to be the main bulk of it. Well, Chorus, thanks for talking to me about Phantom Menace. I know
Always a pleasure.
This is a very controversial topic, talking about Star Wars whenever, but whatever. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to Chorus if you can. He has great content talking about cartoons. If you want to hear more about us talk about Clone Wars, we actually do have a video on that. You can watch that right up there. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any movie suggestions you'd like me to talk about, always leave them in the comments. And thank you so much for watching.
Peace out.